Hello, friends, and welcome back to Dare Me to Prosper. My name is Avery. I'm your host, and this is episode 53. And today's topic is very specific, and I feel like this is one of those topics where it may not apply to everyone, but the people that it does apply to really, really need to hear it. So we're going to deep dive into that today. Also, I want to say, make sure you come back next week. Next week's episode, which is the second to last episode of the year, is going to be the same thing I kind of did last year, which to this day is my most popular episode, but it is what all the psychics, the channelers, the astrologers are predicting for 2026. And so what I did last year and what I'm going to do again this year is not only take my own intuitive, psychic intake of what I am looking at for next year, but also, because you guys know I love to kind of collect information and see what patterns there are. Like anytime I'm looking for any kind of information around predictions, around aliens, around all this stuff where there's just a lot of different information floating around and it's hard to prove things. What I look for is I find people that I innately, trust by watching them kind of over time. And I also like to find patterns that show up again and again and again between people that make these types of predictions or are channelers or just intuitive people in general. It doesn't mean that everything is always correct. And psychic predictions in general, keep in mind if you don't know this, there is no such thing as a 100% guaranteed psychic prediction. It does not exist because we have free will. These choices are always changing and moving. All there is likelihoods. There's probabilities. So anytime there's a psychic prediction, all you can do is say, this is the trajectory of where the energy is headed right now. But collectively, especially, it's like if something else happens or if a lot of people start leaning in a different direction, it'll change the entire trajectory of what happens. So psychic predictions are probabilities, not guarantees. But that being said, it's still a very exciting, episode. I want to go back and listen to last year's episode and see now what kind of played out and what didn't. I don't know. We'll see. But it's still a fun episode no matter what. And I'm really excited to see kind of what comes up for 2026. So anyway, that episode is coming up. Today, we are talking about why you're losing interest or urgency in things you worked so hard for. This is a phenomenon that I think is happening right now, not with everyone, but with people who are in a particular kind of like spot in your growth journey. And so basically, I think it's kind of happening to people who are just at a certain growth point along your own journey where you start to lose interest or urgency around things, again, that you worked really hard for, that you used to really want. And the reason for that is where you are in your kind of journey to a higher frequency. But why a lot of people are feeling it at the same time right now is because the frequency is rising. And so it's kind of like we're all collectively moving up really quickly together because this process of the frequency rising, of the poles shifting, of all the solar flares incoming, it's all picking up speed a lot. And so it's picking up intensity. And so when that happens, again, it's like a radio station. Our bodies have to adjust to the radio station that the earth is working from, the earth is tuned into, so to speak, right? So we don't have a choice. Our bodies are going to pull us in the right direction. Our bodies are going to pull us in the same direction that the earth is moving energetically, right? Is this making sense? I'm trying to make this not dumbed down, but I'm trying to simplify a topic that is really hard to simplify. Anyway, you get the gist of what I'm saying. As that happens though, here's the thing. As that happens, you start to become more aligned with your innate soul path. So as the frequency rises and as everything kind of shifts in that direction and the vibration of the planet is rising, and with that, right, our mood, our nervous system, our overall kind of emotional state as human beings is rising, which means it's getting more mature, it's getting more loving, it's getting more adaptable, it's getting more insightful. Does that make sense? So it's like as it rises, we are growing as people with it, even subconsciously. And we've talked about this before, but it's like you can choose to fight it or you can choose to go with it. You can have free will this whole time. It's just going to be a lot harder to act from a place of selfishness or greed or anger or whatever. The higher the frequency rises, the more difficult it will be for you to sustain your old ways. And so, along with that means that as we're rising, as we're on that trajectory, what you are aligned with, you are going to start becoming more and more a match to that. So picture a scale, right? Picture a scale like from 0 to 10, but it's vertical, right? And we're moving up 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So say we're at like a 3, right? Earth, the people on it, most of us were hanging out around a 3. And then things start rising. And the higher you get on this scale, on this ruler, as you go to a 4 and a 5 and a 6, as that happens, things start changing in a positive way because the frequency is kind of forcing you into a more positive place. And you are becoming, it's like you're coming closer and closer to the person you were always meant to be. When we incarnate here on earth, we have a soul path and all these goals that we want our soul to experience and want to have experiences that allow us to learn certain lessons, right? But when you get here, you have so much free will. You can choose to do that or you can choose to not. So basically what I'm saying is as the frequency rises, it becomes harder to ignore the things that are meant for you. Does that make sense? It becomes harder to stay unaligned with the path that your soul wants to be on. And what that means in a practical sense, I hope this is all making sense at this point. It's very difficult to explain. What that means in a more practical sense is if you are someone who has always had a dream of like being an artist, always had a dream of, being, I don't know, it could be anything. Or maybe you've always had a dream of traveling to a certain country. Or maybe you've always, there's something that you have always felt like was a part of you, but for whatever reason, you haven't been able to act on it. So whether it's just like social expectations, like maybe that job doesn't make enough money, or maybe you don't feel like you're allowed to travel, because of a certain situation, or maybe you are only in a relationship because, this is the expectation of you. Like maybe you have a different sexual orientation than you feel comfortable saying out loud. Like all of these things where we are living a life that is not really for us, but we've kind of put ourselves in that position because that's what felt safe at the time, or that's what felt expected of us at the time. What's happening is, because that can apply to so many different things, but what's happening is it's becoming more and more difficult to sustain not being aligned with who we really are. And so what that means is you may have worked really, really hard for something. Maybe it's a career. Maybe it's a habit that you have instilled in yourself. We'll get into more examples later. But it's like you worked so hard for something and you spent all this time and energy in your life focused on this one thing, all of a sudden, maybe in the last year or so, to realize, I don't even care about this anymore. Like, is this even what I want? Is this even what I want to do or have anymore? You start to lose interest in it. Or the other part of that we're going to talk about is maybe you don't lose interest in the thing, but you lose the urgency behind it. So you lose like all of the like hustle motivation that you had. Like maybe you still love fitness and you still love, being healthy and working out or whatever it is, but you lost the, that feeling of like urgency. Like I have to work out every day. I have to, You lost that feeling. And so now it's like, well, I still enjoy this, but I feel like I've lost my motivation. It makes me feel lazy. We're going to talk about these things, why your perspective on things in your life might be changing in a way that you didn't really plan for. Okay, basically people are feeling unsettled because the way they used to pursue goals doesn't work anymore, and it feels like something is wrong. But what's actually happening is a shift out of the unaligned survival-driven motivation, and now we're shifting into alignment-driven momentum. Does that make sense? So it's not about the fact that we're not going to be ambitious anymore, or we're not going to have a desire to do certain things anymore. It's letting go of the old world energy around doing those things or around why we do those things. Because when we are in a place of higher alignment, urgency doesn't belong. Pressure doesn't belong. Over-giving, over-effort, those things don't belong. They are being removed from the equation, which is a good thing because what it does is it allows our nervous system to relax. And I've talked about this a lot, but as we move into 2026, 2027, one thing that we will all notice is that we are being pushed to let go of things that make us anxious, or let go of ways of living that make us tense and anxious, we are going to move into a time where our nervous systems become very front and center, very talked about. We're going to recognize more. We already notice this, right, collectively, but more and more, we're going to, I think, recognize how important the nervous system is. And this is already happening, but that's going to start to become more of a conversation, especially in workspaces and relationships. Like that's already becoming a thing, like recognizing that if you're in a relationship where your nervous system is on edge all the time, that's not a good thing. If you work in a work environment where you're stressed out all the time, or you feel like you just can't relax, or you're always on edge, or your mental health or your well-being is really suffering because of your work environment, that is also not a good thing. And that's really not sustainable. And as we move forward into this new future, the new energy that will be supported is that those things will not be able to sustain that type of system anymore. Okay, so we're getting rid of the urgency, like the I have to do this and this and this and this. And it means that I'm successful if I perform this well, and if I'm the first one to get there and the last one to leave, and, you know, if I work out every single day, and if I eat perfectly, and, you know, all of this. Or just losing interest in things that were more matrix derived instead of alignment derived. Like we're losing interest in things that we never really wanted, but we did anyway because it was an expectation or because it was a societal norm. Those are the things that are loosening their grip. These bits of the old system are falling apart. But the reason that this episode is important is because when that happens, we start to question things and we start to go, why do I not have interest in this career that I spent 20 years building? Or why do I not feel motivated to do this thing that I've been doing my whole life? I love this thing. I love this person. I love this, lifestyle. Why am I losing the feeling of must do, must do, must do? This is why. Okay. And when you really break it down, the old motivational system is what we'll call it. Okay. The old motivational system was built on fear. And you might be like, what do you mean? How is it built on fear? The fear of the things that we cannot, the fear of things that we cannot always name, like the fear of falling behind, the fear of instability, the fear of scarcity and not having enough, the fear of not being enough. As the collective nervous systems begin to relax and lose tension, the fear-based fuel stops working because the body no longer tolerates it. Like your body goes, this is no longer sustainable, and the energy that matches this low frequency state is no longer something that I have access to. So we have to change how we do things. So it's no longer motivating for you to do something because you're afraid of what will happen if you don't. It's no longer motivating for you to do something because you're afraid of falling behind, or you're afraid of social backlash, or you're afraid of your boss, or whatever it is. As your frequency rises, your nervous system is going to start regulating on its own, which, let me tell you, this is the most amazing part of everything. Because as someone whose nervous system has been in fight or flight for years, and now, like just in the last 6-7 months since I left my marriage, it has taken me so many of those months just to calm myself down with meditation, with lifestyle practices, with just being out of that environment is a huge part of it. But it's taken so much work to lower my nervous system baseline and have my body adjust to that. It caused me so many hormonal changes and weight fluctuations and appetite changes and all energy changes and all these different things as my body was kind of coming down from that panic after years. Do you know how long it takes your body to re-regulate after being in fight or flight for years? It's a long time. It's not this extreme, but I almost want to compare it to after you have a baby and your body goes through insane hormonal changes postpartum, and because it has to readjust and kind of just do everything differently. It's similar to that, where it's when your body comes out of fight or flight, it has to rearrange everything because you're living out of a completely different survival mode. So your nervous system's starting to regulate on its own just because the frequency of the planet is changing. That's a really big deal. That means that you don't have to work so hard just to feel at peace because your body will start aligning to that state naturally. I just want you guys to understand how big of a deal that is, especially if you are naturally kind of an anxious person. That is life-changing, okay? Anyway, when the nervous system becomes more regulated, again, it doesn't respond to panic as a productive force. Like it will start recognizing, even subconsciously, even without you really being conscious of it, you won't feel as internally pressured to act because you feel panicked and anxious. And we're already starting to see this, like already now pushing harder. Like you may find that when you push harder and you're really trying to do like maybe the same habits that you've done for years, like overworking at work or pushing your body too hard or overgiving inside of a relationship. Basically, any situation, any topic, any part of your life where you're doing too much, but you're just used to doing too much, or you're doing too much because you feel like you don't have another option, all of a sudden, and you might already be experiencing this, that feels exhausting where it may used to have felt empowering, right? Your body is rejecting outdated survival cues, outdated survival mechanisms. But here's the part you need to hear, okay? If you relate to this, if you find yourself all of a sudden going, why am I not interested in this anymore? Why do I not care about this anymore? Why does this not feel the same way it used to? Losing interest in something does not mean that you are lazy or that you have lost who you are. Losing interest doesn't mean laziness, and losing urgency doesn't mean you've lost interest. Remember, because I said there's two different camps. One, you might be feeling like you've just lost interest in something and you can't figure out why, because it used to be something that really mattered to you, or losing urgency, where you still really like the thing, you enjoy the thing, a job, a hobby, a habit, whatever, it's a good thing, but you don't feel so like controlled by the need to do that thing. You don't feel so tense about it. You don't feel that urgency. And that doesn't mean that you've lost interest in it altogether, but you've just lost the panic around it. If you lose interest, the thing feels empty. It feels disconnected. It feels like it's lost its meaning entirely. That is your clue that it might not be in alignment for you anymore. Versus if you've lost urgency, the thing might still matter, but you just don't feel so pressured around it. So examples of this, right? Maybe you have relationships that revolve around toxic dynamics or codependence, or again, giving up your own needs for somebody else. And now, as this is not becoming sustainable anymore, you realize how unsustainable it is, how you need to distance yourself. Maybe you need to end the relationship. Maybe you need to set really strong boundaries. You're no longer available for the arguments and debates where you're not being heard, because your body is losing the urgency around a situation. It's losing the feeling of duty or loyalty that you felt like you needed to have to participate in this relationship. Does that make sense? So, up to this point, I've really been speaking to urgency as if it's around a thing that you still want in your life. But this also applies to things that you don't want in your life. So if you have felt pressure or urgency that you need to show up somewhere or you need to be a certain way, as the frequency rises, that emotion is getting weaker. Okay, maybe you have habits or beliefs that you felt like were necessary, that you felt pressure around. You felt like, I have to participate in this habit or this belief because this is what is socially appropriate. Or, maybe you're someone who has been inside the church and all of a sudden you're feeling like a less urgency to perform or, just be a part of this culture that maybe you're starting to realize you don't resonate with so much. Those feelings of like false pressure are falling away for everyone. And when that false pressure, it's like when the pressure starts to loosen, all of a sudden people have space to go, wait a minute, is this even what I want? Do I really even like this thing? Or, all of a sudden, I don't feel like I have to perform anymore. All of a sudden, I don't feel like I have to go to church anymore. All of a sudden, I don't feel like I have to entertain this argument anymore. All of a sudden, I don't feel like I have to wear a full face of makeup 24/7. Like, I feel a little bit more relaxed around this topic. Or maybe it's like an ingrained belief that you've always carried, like, I have to be busy to be valuable. Like, you're one of those people who can't sit down without feeling guilty. You feel like you always need to be everywhere doing everything. Well, now You may find that you've lost interest in the need to be busy, or you may find that downtime is a little bit easier for you. You don't feel as guilty anymore. Or maybe doom scrolling, all of a sudden when it didn't bother you as much before, now it's starting to weigh on you a little bit. Like maybe you no longer resonate with the idea of hustling, whether that's like physically hustling at the gym or whether it's hustling in a career or at work or whatever category it's in. You don't continue to feel the need to push so hard to look a certain way or weigh a specific amount or present as this specific type of person. All of these are also examples of losing interest in something that used to matter to you, even subconsciously, okay? That's losing interest. But again, comparing that to losing urgency, which means you still care about the thing, but you lose the pressure around it. Loss of urgency feels more like your mind is just quieter, it's slower, it's more spacious. You still enjoy or you like the thing, the person, the habit, the belief, but you just feel calmer about it. The desire is there, but the panic is gone. You lose interest in forcing and rushing, not because you have given up, but because you recognize that speed or fear are no longer the primary drivers of why you need to do something. The anxiety and the adrenaline that used to drive your action are going to dissipate. And what will this look like? Collectively, again, this doesn't happen overnight. Nothing that I talk about really happens overnight, right? But collectively, as the energy shifts and as things change, think about, I always use the workforce and jobs as an example because one, it's something that everybody's got for the most part. And two, it's just a really common, easy place to where you see this behavior and these interactions a lot. So it's just an easy example to make out of, but I don't want to do that so much where you can't understand that it doesn't have to be a job. It can literally be a belief or a feeling. Anyways, but collectively, have you noticed, for example, as millennials have started to become bosses in more companies and different things, like you're seeing more millennials instead of boomers who are running a company or being the manager or whatever it is. And a big thing that we have noticed over time is that millennials are way different bosses than boomers were or even Gen Xers. Now, it doesn't mean that there's no you might be like, my manager is a millennial and they're terrible. That very well might be the case. But by and large, as millennials have entered the leadership positions in the work field, we've noticed collectively a change where millennials are more likely to pay attention to their employees' mental health, to the general work environment, the relationships. They're very aware of their employees' well-being and the need to take time off and the need to just have flexibility or to take care of your family when an emergency happens or whatever it is. Millennials have just been running things differently. And I think we will continue to see that as the line, different generations will become, we always look to the generations behind us to learn what not to do, right? And so I'm sure we'll be doing things wrong and Gen Alpha and, Gen Z will look at us and be like, y'all did a horrible job at this. We're going to change something. That's fair. But basically what I'm saying is we're already moving in this direction of like, stop gripping so hard. Recognize that people are people. Recognize that it's not healthy to hustle all the time, right? So we're already moving in that trajectory, and I feel like it's just going to become more and more and more evident and obvious and widespread, again, as the frequency shifts, that there's going to become a need and a want and a desire for all of us to just be more human, to feel relaxed, to just let go of the panic and the hustle and the pressure and all of those things. The problem is we have we are living and have been raised in a society where we were taught to hustle, right? It's like the boomers came in and they were like, you need to work at the same place for 40 years and you need to be the first one there and the last, because that's how they were raised, right? And so they kind of trickled that down to us and we were like, wait a minute, this is actually really terrible for you and we're all miserable. Why would we want to do this? But nevertheless, that's a mindset shift. We have to shift the way we view that because that's been ingrained in us for such a long time in our culture. And so what happens is when that grip starts to loosen, when that urgency starts to go away, or when you start to lose interest in something that's not aligned for you, you might misinterpret that. Your brain might feed you the narrative that you're being lazy or that you're a failure because you've always been taught that stress equals productivity. And so instead of feeling like, oh, wow, I feel calm, your brain goes, why are we being lazy? Instead of feeling like, oh, it feels really good to rest. I worked really hard. Now I'm going to rest. Your brain interprets that as, no, you're a failure. You need to get up and get something done because all of your value comes from being productive. Okay, but here's the difference that we have not experienced as a collective, and this is really important. In reality, when you are calm and you're focused, like when you still have the desire for the thing, but you don't, instead of feeling stress around it, you just feel calm. Calm focus is a much higher functioning state that allows you to make more accurate decisions. I can't talk. Allows you to make more accurate decisions, and it's more sustainable for success. Like imagine you have two different people, right? And person A has a lot of focus, but they're also really just stressed out and anxious and hustling and, ignoring their well-being. And then you have person B who is more relaxed and calm. They're really, putting a lot of focus on their mental health and their well-being, and they understand boundaries with work. And again, I'm using work as an example because it's easy, but please keep in mind this applies to all sorts of different situations. You can function in a much higher state if you're focused but calm. So just to, again, get this out of the work example, you can embody this around a belief. Like if you believe that you always need to say yes to people and you feel a lot of pressure in that, all of a sudden you realize that you don't feel that pressure anymore. You feel calm. It's like you can experience that same situation where maybe you decide you do want to say yes to someone, but you're coming from a calm state, so it's easier for you to be like, is this people pleasing or am I just truly okay saying yes to this person, right? When you are coming from a calm state of mind versus when you are coming from an anxious state of mind, you're going to live two completely different lives because making decisions from a calm place versus making decisions from an anxious place, those are two wildly separate situations. Okay, so this is a very specific psychological topic, but I want to deep dive into this because it's very possible that you're experiencing this, but you don't really have words for it or you don't really understand why you feel differently than you used to. And so I'm trying to give you the structure to contain this in so you understand, oh, that's why I feel that way. And I'm not lazy and I'm not unproductive and I'm not doing anything wrong. It's just that the energy is changing and we're shifting pathways. We're going from this old pathway to this new pathway. And now our environment is different. Our views down this pathway are different. We're interacting with it differently. Instead of running, now we get to walk. We get to take a peaceful walk through the woods instead of trying to sprint and race down this pathway. Okay, here's another thing I want to talk to. Some people feel a lot of grief around their old goals because for many people, your goals that you have in life, right? Could be work, could be relational goals, could be just personal goals for yourself that you wanted to accomplish. A lot of times those goals were tied to your identity, approval of others, feeling safe, both physically and emotionally. And that was why you had those goals instead of having goals that you truly resonated with. Like say, for example, you have a goal of being in a fitness competition, but maybe it's not because you just really, really enjoy that process. Maybe it's because you have always felt this intense pressure to have a really specific physique or weigh a certain amount or look a certain way. And so you felt pressured, but instead of kind of recognizing that, you just felt like, oh, I'm going to go down this path because this seems to match the thing that I feel pressured to do. Okay. And let's say you win that fitness competition, right? So then all of a sudden you have a new identity around how people view you in that setting. You now have the approval of all of these different people because you did this thing that looks impressive or you did this thing that people are interested in. And so it brings you all of this attention and approval and, this certain level of respect. And that's what you really want. You didn't care. You didn't really resonate with this idea of, I just love the process of fitness competitions. It's more like, I am craving this type of interaction from people, but I don't have the understanding to know how to do that in a healthy way or do it in a way that really aligns with myself. And so I'm just going to take the, quickest path of least resistance to get to this place. Does that make sense? And so what happens is when people all of a sudden go, why do I not care about this anymore? Like, this isn't resonating with me. Or I still like fitness, but I just don't feel that urgent around it. Like now I'll just do it, when I'll just go to the gym a couple times a week, or I'll just take a hike, that just sounds more fun. I don't really want to run marathons anymore or whatever. All of a sudden, if that happens, people feel a lot of grief because they go, well, this is who I was. This is who I am. Without this thing, without this belief, without this job, without this person, without this habit, who am I? I don't know what to feel now. And that's a really scary place because you've built so much of your life around that. But this is what I want to say if you are someone who relates to that. This is not you losing your identity. This is you losing a false identity so that you can be aligned with who you really always were. Because as we move into this new energy, that's exactly what path this energy will put you on. The higher frequency that you are, the higher frequency that you can rise. This isn't correct English. How do I say what I'm trying to say? The higher the frequency, the more alignment there is there. Does that make sense? The more high frequency you are, the more aligned you will be by default. Okay? But when that transition starts to happen and when the thing that you are so used to starts to fall away, you go, hold on, now what? I don't know what I want, especially if you were someone who always did things because other people expected them of you, or who always did them because that's what your parents wanted. And you never really got to figure out as you were growing up who you are and what you like and what expectations you had for yourself instead of what other people had for you. This applies to a lot of people, but especially if you relate to those things at all, then all of a sudden, if those things get stripped away, it's going to be really terrifying because you've never actually had a chance to develop the foundation of who you are and what you like and what you want to do with your life. Okay, so it can almost feel like mourning a version of yourself that you worked really hard to become. Because again, like you may have worked so hard to meet a certain goal or to get to a certain place or whatever it is. And now you don't care. And you're like, I spent so much of my life on this. And that's scary because it feels like a waste. It feels like, what have I done? I spent all this time. This is why people will literally stay in relationships that they don't belong in and that they're miserable in because they think, well, I've already been married for 20 years, or it's too late to get divorced now, or, we've got all these kids together. I've put too much work and energy into this. We're too meshed. I can't do anything. But those choices are not aligned. And so what happens is they will stay in these negative situations. And I want to be careful here because I'm not saying it's easy and I don't want to pretend like anybody can just snap their fingers and change a situation. It's a lot more complicated than that. And, there's safety issues and there's financial issues. Like I get it. So I'm knowing that. But my point in the greater context is when you stay in a situation that is not aligned for you, especially as the frequency rises, it's going to get harder and harder and harder because we tend to make excuses and think, I've put too much into this to let go of it. But the reality is that's not how it works. You were meant to go through things to learn certain lessons. Like I just left a 13-year marriage. And my daughter asked me this the other day because she's so freaking perceptive, but she was like, would you do it all over again? And I was like, well, the 3 kids, right? I have you 3. Like, of course I would do it again. She's like, okay. Well, pretend like you didn't have us. Would you get married and do the whole thing again? And honestly, that's such a hard question to answer because I'm like, surface level, I want to be like, no. I wish I had a much better experience. But the deeper part of me goes, but look how far I've come. Look at all the things I learned. I got married at 22. I'm 35. Okay. Look how much I have grown as a person because I was married in a situation that was so difficult. And honestly, it was difficult from the get-go. It was really bad at the end, but this was a difficult relationship and a difficult environment from day one. So I learned so much all of these years and especially at the end when I like really had to have a come to moment, because by the time I left, it was like, I've done everything I know how to do. I've tried to change myself. I've tried to act differently. I've tried therapy. I've tried talking. It was like I did everything that I felt like I could do until I finally got to that point where I was like, okay, I no longer value this relationship the way that I once did. And this is not who I am. I am not the person who can stay here in this relationship. This isn't the kind of person, this isn't the kind of example I want to give to my kids. Not that it was an easy decision just to leave, because right? That's the temptation to be like, I've worked so hard to get here. I've put in all this work. We've raised these kids, and now we're just going to change all of that and go in a different direction. It seems like a lot of time down the drain. This is my point. It's not time down the drain. It was lesson learning. It was evolution. It was development. And we don't say this in our society. We don't view things this way. But in reality, the most valuable thing you can give yourself is growth and evolution, to develop into the best version of yourself, to develop into someone who is more emotionally intelligent, to develop into someone who is kinder and more loving and less argumentative and more understanding and compassionate and all of these things. You growing as a human is like the biggest gift that you can give yourself and everyone around you. So nothing that we put our time and effort into is wasted. Every single thing that we put effort into, that we put attention into, that we put our energy into had a purpose, and you are a different person in some way, shape, or form because you had that experience. So it wasn't wasted. Dang it, this is going to be another long episode. I hate when they get too long because it ends up taking me forever to edit, but I'm like, sometimes I just have a lot to say. Also, this might be a good time to mention just a reminder that in the second tier of the Patreon, we have a membership option where not only do you get all of the extra episodes on the Patreon, you get one extra episode every week, but also we do a group meeting and you don't have to participate live. You can always just watch the recording, but we have the option for you to show up to a group meeting with me every single month and discuss just what's going on in your life and try to kind of, discuss it from a spiritual angle and, how we want to approach different things, or just bounce ideas off of other people who are of a similar mindset to you. And that's something that, not all of us, many of us actually don't have other people in our lives that maybe have this same mindset or who are evolving in a spiritual sense. Maybe they're really religious, or maybe they're atheists, or maybe they just don't have the same framework that we do. And that's fine. But it makes it hard sometimes to, deep dive into some of these topics if you don't have anybody to talk about that with. So I just want to mention that we do have that membership, and you also get discounts on my current or future courses. You have the ability to participate in Q&A episodes, and there's some other perks as well. So that is linked in the description. So I want to mention that. Okay, the next thing I want to say though is I want to do a shout out to people who, maybe this is slim, but if you're listening to this episode and maybe you don't resonate with this topic as much, maybe you're like, I don't feel like I'm losing interest in anything right now. I feel like I'm in a good spot. You're in a different camp of people. So I want to mention this because people evolve and develop in different ways, on different trajectories, at different speeds, and all of this. If you're someone who maybe doesn't relate to this topic as much, you might be someone who kind of course corrects gradually, right? So there's people basically who have poured everything into something for a long time because they felt like it was the right thing to do, or, there's social pressure, or maybe they were pressured from their parents, or for whatever reason, their life and their options led them to feel like they needed to stay in this one camp for whatever it is, because they didn't have the freedom to act otherwise. Versus some people are just more naturally inclined to say, F the system. You know what I mean? Some people are just more naturally inclined to course correct as they go. So it's kind of like you were already possibly on a trajectory where you were like, this job doesn't resonate with me. I'm going to leave and go somewhere else. Whereas somebody else might have felt like, I don't feel like I have the freedom to quit and go somewhere else. You know what I mean? So if you are listening to this and you happen to not really resonate personally with this, it might be that, again, you just course corrected along the way. You were just refining as you went rather than stay. And then all of a sudden, big change, big transition. So for you, maybe there's less shock when the energy shifts, the energy changes because you were like, oh yeah, I've kind of been gradually on this path the whole time, versus people who are like, I've been in this place for a long time. And then when the energy changes, it's like, boom, big transition. And you didn't really have as much time to prepare. So it's just totally two different ways of operating based on, your own personality and experiences and whatnot. Okay, I need to move. I have more things to talk about, but I need to kind of shut up a little bit. Okay, I just want to touch on this practically because with topics like this, a lot of times it can be like, that's a really cool topic. What the hell does that mean for my real actual life? Because it's such a heady topic. You're like, how can I actually apply that? At least that's where my brain goes. Okay. So the way that this practically shows up, if you're wondering, am I experiencing this or not? What does it actually look like? This is what it looks like. You may notice that you still want the outcome of something, but you're no longer willing to sacrifice your health, your peace, or your relationships to get there. It's not a lack of discipline. It's an increase in self-trust. You and your well-being are becoming more important to you. And also, when your urgency and your anxiety fades, your intuition becomes louder. Your intuition is actually allowed to have more space to communicate with you because it's not overtaken by anxiousness and panic. And so people stop chasing things that they intuitively don't feel like align because their intuition is actually louder. Okay, so what this will look like is the new energy supports authenticity over intensity. So instead of the question being how hard can I push? How much can I succeed? How hard can I work? Or how much can I impress people? The new question becomes, what actually fits my energy? What actually aligns with me? What are my new values? And collectively, everybody is going to start shifting towards that. It doesn't mean that we're all exactly the same or that we all shift overnight or that everybody's on the same page. No, that's not how it works. But just in general, we're moving to an energy of, what do I actually care about? What do I actually want? What is actually aligned with me? A good way to kind of summarize this is that motivation is becoming internally regulated instead of externally regulated. Instead of looking externally to be triggered and pressured into doing things, now we're going internally and thinking, what matters to me? What do I want? And this is not selfish, guys, because remember, I think this is another thing that collectively and societally, we have been taught that thinking about ourselves and what we want is selfish. But there's a difference between someone who is selfish and someone who has a strong self-worth in such a way that they can value themselves the way that they can value other people. Because if you sacrifice yourself in order to please other people, you are not benefiting them or you. And that's a rabbit hole. So we talk about that in other episodes, like self-worth and all of that. But it's bad all around, right? But that's kind of what we've been taught is hustle, 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 hustle because of other people's expectations and because I just want to feel good. I want to look good. If I perform or behave or I do these certain things, that is external motivation. Instead of now, we can have evolution and growth based on our own internal motivation without burning ourselves out, without abandoning ourselves in the process. Okay, and this is the last thing I kind of want to mention on this topic. If we zoom out, this also is going to have a really big impact collectively, globally within our systems, right? I love this topic so much. I always like to take our spiritual topics and zoom out and think, how is this going to affect the collective? Because obviously so much is going on right now in our world. It's very interesting to me to see how the energy that affects us as individuals also affects the collective in a totally different way. So I want to mention that as this change happens, this is a change that will really threaten our current systems because we have been living in a world where the systems, like the government systems, the work field, the corporate field, financial systems, our school, literally everything depends on pressure to behave a certain way and to perform a certain way and societal standards and doing work because it's expected or because it's respected and not because it's actually what we want, right? Because if we all did what we actually wanted, what would we see? A ton of diversity because we're all super diverse people who are all different. We want different things. We're interested in different things. We're talented in different ways, blah, blah, blah. It would just look like this vast, mosaic of different types of people. But the structure we live in wants to put everybody in a box, right? It's like when you're growing up in school, what careers can I have? You can be a doctor, a lawyer, or a teacher, right? Did anybody else growing up hear that only 5 jobs that you could be? If I had known how many jobs were out there, I would have had a totally different path. But everybody gets boxed in. And that serves the quote unquote powers that be very well because it creates a system of workers. And also, the hustle-based systems create like fuel for their machine, right? Because if everybody is hustling, it's like they have sheep getting the work done. They treat us like factory workers doing their dirty work, right? But hustle-based systems rely on exhaustion to keep people compliant, right? We talk about this in all different sorts of areas, but the same way that keeping you poor keeps them in control, or keeping you angry puts them in control. Like, that's the reason they want us to hate each other, Every time that we as a people are in a really low vibrational negative state, it's better for them because it gives them more power and control. So when they have a system that requires us to hustle, we are exhausted and burned out, and we don't have any stamina left to pursue our own businesses or to pour a ton of time and effort into causes that we care about and things like that. They like having us in the machine. So here's the thing. When the energy changes, when people stop responding to pressure, when we stop feeling the need to perform because of external motivation, all of those systems lose leverage, because we will no longer feel pressure to earn our worth from performing a certain way in the system. This model works great for the system, and it works horribly for us because it keeps us in an externally motivated state. But when we start to trust ourselves, instead of looking to the system to tell us what to do or how to act or who we are, all of a sudden that shifts all of the power from the top of the pyramid to the bottom of the pyramid, which we talk about in every episode, right? How the pyramid is flipping. Go back and listen to old episodes if you want to hear more about that. But like how the energy, the power is coming down from the pyramid, and it's going to be more, this sounds really esoteric, but it's like basically having a society that is where the power is very distributed versus having a society where it's like a king at the top. We don't have a king, but our society sure works like that, where it's only a few people at the top have all this power and we have very little power. I feel like we have like fake freedom. Like, yeah, we have choices to a certain extent, until there's a ceiling in the amount of choice we are allowed to have in how things are done, how things are run, right? So going back to the energy, when it shifts from, I need to hustle, I need to do this, I need to do that, there's expectations that are on me, I need to meet the societal standard. When it changes from that and that grip releases because the energy doesn't support it anymore, all of a sudden we're like, what do I want? That is one thing that the system, the people at the top, the people in control, they do not want you to ask, what do you want? Because that gives you power. Imagine if every single person on earth all of a sudden went, you know what? I cannot sustain this type of life anymore that feeds into the system. I'm going to do things that matter to me. I'm going to raise my children in a way that I think is right. I'm going to refuse the system. Now, I don't want to get so into this topic where I don't recognize, not everybody has this choice. If you are starving, if you have family that's really sick, if there's plenty of situations where you literally are backed into a corner, you don't have an option. However, the people that do have an option, it's important to take it. If you are in a place where you can leave a toxic relationship, you can leave a job that is not aligned for you, you can be a better example for the people around you, or just love yourself more or respect yourself more, you should do those things. Because the more each of us makes choices, little choices that slowly add up, and we slowly start living out of a place of more authenticity, that's how movements grow. Right? That's how things start to change, because as one person does it and another person does it and another person does it, things start to catch on and societies start to shift. Anyway, I need to wrap this up, but let me leave you with some encouragement. If you are feeling like you're in this phase right now, instead of forcing yourself to get motivated or to hustle or to continue letting your motivation be external, observe what kind of motivation still feels good to you? What do you feel aligned with? What do you feel called to? Because your energy is going to start leading you to what is aligned to you, and you're going to have more access to your intuition to follow that. So a good way to kind of explain it is that the subtle beneath the surface feelings, the subconscious feelings almost, that we've had our whole lives that maybe have been like a little whisper in our ear, that is getting louder. And so the reason that all of these societal changes are being made is because it's kind of like everybody's subconscious voice is kind of creeping up on them. Everybody's subconscious feelings are going to start rising to the top and going, you know what? You have had these little background thoughts your whole life. Now it's time to act on them. Because again, the energy that's incoming, the energy shift that we are taking means more access to your intuition, more access to your gifts, less cooperation with doing things that are not aligned with you, etc., etc. So that might have been one of the most abstract topics I've ever covered. I hope that it really made sense and landed for you, especially if you're somebody that's going through that. Let me know. Leave some feedback, leave a review. Let me know what you thought. I love getting your feedback. I love hearing your thoughts because, again, if you don't leave that, I have no idea if this is resonating with you or not. So I love when you guys actually comment and leave reviews. It really is helpful for me to see what you guys really like and what resonates with you. Don't forget to leave a review. If you have enjoyed at least 2 of my podcast episodes, please leave a review. Okay, I'm still a fairly new podcaster and things are just getting started, and those reviews mean a lot. In fact, I noticed this a long time ago, but I should share this. Most of my reviews are really good, but I noticed that right after I came out with the episode on deconstructing my Christianity, somebody left like a 2-star review. I don't know if that's what happened. Like maybe they just hated the podcast. That's fine. Everybody's entitled to their opinion. But I was like, I kind of feel like maybe I made a Christian mad. They left me a 2-star review. Anyway, there's only one, okay? And I'm laughing about it. It's not going to kill me, but I think you guys just like don't realize how much I appreciate your reviews. So please go do that if you have not already. Okay, can't wait to edit this hour-long episode. This will be fun. I love you guys. Thank you for listening. Don't forget to check out the Patreon, both the just like basic tier and the second tier with the meeting. I would love to see you guys over there. It's in the description, and I will see you in the next episode. Bye.